Welcome back to the Feel for the Game College Basketball Podcast. This is now episode 3. I'm going to be picking some more games this week, so that's what I decided to end up doing. It's going to be mostly higher profile games. I'm not going to be digging into a lot of mid major games this week, and part of that is because last week didn't go too great for me. I actually only went 9 for 20 in game picks, which is 9 and 11, so not a good start. But another reason, too, is because I'm recording this on Tuesday at 5:15, and a lot of games are about to start in a little bit. I waited super late to do this. Just didn't have a lot of time, so I got to get this out quickly. Probably not going to be able to edit this, so if I make any mistakes or anything in this, just gonna have to stick it out. But let me get into some of these picks now. So the first game here kicks off or tips off in 14 minutes for me. It's 5:16 right now. This one starts at 5:30. Michigan's going to be hosting Wake. So Michigan obviously with Jaxel, their big transfer. Yaxel, what's his last name? Lindeborg. Yeah, I was trying to remember his last name, but Yaxel Lindeborg. Decent game against Oakland. The team as a whole put up 121 in that game. They get Wake now. Wake is 2-0 with wins against Morehead State and American, only by 14 points and 16 points. So relatively close wins against teams that aren't very good. Michigan hosting this one. They're up to number 6. I mean, this should be Michigan by a lot. No, I don't really think Wake has that much of a chance in this one, unfortunately. So, next big game is Cincinnati hosting Dayton. Cincinnati and Dayton both off the 2-0 starts. Cincinnati with wins over Western Carolina and Georgia State, but the Georgia State game was only by 10. And then Dayton, proud program there. 40-point win against Canisius. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. And then they only beat UMBC by 6. So both these teams had good openers, and then a little too close for comfort in their next games. Maybe they were looking forward to this one. So with Cincinnati hosting this one, I like them slightly, but big test for either team or for both teams. We'll get to see what these teams are made of tonight. And that one's at 6 o'clock. Next game here. Davidson hosts Charlotte. Or no, Charlotte hosts Davidson. Charlotte and Davidson both off the 2-0 starts. Charlotte's 16-point win against Indiana State and a 5-point win against Tennessee Tech. And as for Davidson, beat a D2 team by like 40 and then dominant win against Washington State. So the line on this game is Charlotte by 1.5. I don't know how I feel about Charlotte this year, to be honest. I think that's a big wild card team, and I feel the same way about Davidson, kind of. That's probably why this line's only at 1.5. Charlotte, but I'm going to favor the 49ers here at home by just a little bit. But either way, any outcome in this game really wouldn't shock me. Here, one of the main games of the night, Florida hosting Florida State. Florida favored by 16.5 in this one. I think that's a little too much. Florida obviously lost the opener to Arizona, and then they rebounded with a 40-point win against Northern Florida. As for Florida State, they are 2-0. They've scored 108 and 101 in those games against SWAC teams, so not the best competition for Florida State. I do think Florida wins this game, but I do think it'll be competitive, and I think Florida State covers that 16.5. I'd probably have them losing by about 10, but I think this is going to be a shootout. Absolute shootout. We saw Florida State put up, I'm not sure if they got to 100 against Bama in an exhibition. I know Bama got to 100, but I'm pretty sure Florida State got well into the 90s at least in that game. But this is a team that can score the ball. I expect them to do that tonight, but against Florida, I think it's not going to be enough. Probably the biggest game of the whole night here. Kentucky travels to Louisville. Louisville favored by 6.5 points. I think that's a little too much. Louisville 2-0, as is Kentucky. Louisville with wins over South Carolina State by 50 points and Jackson State by 45. Kentucky beat Nicholls State by 25 and Valparaiso by 50. So neither of these teams playing anybody great yet, but Kentucky has owned Louisville recently, and I know Louisville was very down a couple years ago, but I still like Kentucky to win this game. Actually, I do, and that's assuming that they're healthy right now. I should have looked into that before I made this prediction, but assuming that they're healthy and have the dudes they want, I think they win. But if they're still banged up, missing some of those guys, I take Louisville. That's my fault for not researching that before we started here, but I'm taking Kentucky, assuming everything is normal out there. And I think there's only one more game I'm going to be looking at that is tonight. No, I got two more. Two more. Illinois is going to be hosting Texas Tech. Illinois has a ton of Europeans on their team. I think their entire starting five is Europeans. They're favored by 3.5 points. Both these teams are 2-0. Illinois has played Jackson State and Florida Gulf Coast and scored 113 points in both of those. Texas Tech 2-0 with wins over Landon and Sam Houston State. They've scored 98 in both their games. So interesting stat there about those teams having the same amount of points in their first two games. Illinois has this one at home. I like them to win this game. Really just because of that. I think these teams are pretty even, but home court advantage is what you're gonna go with when you're not sure. And then 8 o'clock, Ole Miss hosting Memphis. Ole Miss 2-0. Memphis only 1-0. They've only played one game to this point. Ole Miss with a couple of wins against CLA and ULM, scoring 88 and 86 in those contests. And then Memphis with a good win to start off the year against San Francisco, 76-70 there at home. I'm starting to have some internet problems. I'm trying to load up stats, but yeah, my phone's not wanting to cooperate. But I'm taking Ole Miss in this game. I was going to look up some Memphis stats, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to take Ole Miss at home here. Memphis looked really sketchy in a couple exhibition games, giving up over 100 points each time. So I'm going to go with who I believe to be more consistent at this point, and that is Ole Miss. Even though Memphis dominated Ole Miss last year, I like Ole Miss here, especially since they're hosting it. So moving on to the Wednesday slate. Not sure if there's going to be much here to talk about. Missouri does host Minnesota. Missouri only favored by 6.5. I was down on Missouri coming into this year. I was, and they have looked pretty sketchy to this point. They went on the road and beat Howard by 21, which is okay. I mean that's a weird road game to start off the year. But then SEMO pushed them to the brink. They only beat SEMO 89-84, and then they rebounded against VMI. But this game was close for a little bit there against VMI, but they ended up winning 106-68. But I don't know about Missouri. I don't know. Minnesota, it's been a while since they've done anything. They're 2-0 with wins and bye games. I'm just kind of confused as to how this spread is this close. Unless this is a neutral site game. I mean, there's just no way a game at Missouri against Minnesota would be this close unless Vegas just doesn't think they're good. I'm actually going to check that out before we move on here. Because in my first preview, I had some games wrong about with where they were and stuff because ESPN is a garbage app and didn't specify. All right. It is. No, it's at Missouri. Really interesting that this line's only that close. I like Missouri to win the game, but I think it's going to be close. And if they lose, I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised at all because I am down on them. Moving ahead here on Wednesday. Not really seeing much else to this point. All right, moving on to Thursday. The backyard brawl of basketball happens on Thursday night at 5. West Virginia hosting Pittsburgh. Both these teams are 3-0 already. Nothing really notable on West Virginia's resume. They haven't played great in their first three games against a weak competition. And as for Pittsburgh, much of the same. They haven't looked overly impressive. So, not a lot of separation that you can see between these two squads through the early part of the year. But I like West Virginia to win this game at home. They're also in the better, stronger conference. I think they get this one done. Alabama hosts Purdue. And I think this game is in Birmingham, actually. No, it's at Alabama. But yeah, this is a huge game. Huge game. Purdue looked a little sketchy there for a little bit against Oakland. Or no, they looked sketchy the whole game. They only ended up winning this one by 10. I like Alabama to win this game, get another huge win, especially with it being at home. They looked so good against St. John's. They looked elite against St. John's. Really, really scary team. I think Purdue might actually get beat badly in this game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they lose by 15, 20, 25 in this one against the Tide. Going forward on here, that's going to be it for Thursday, actually. There's not many games on Thursday. I'm looking forward to Friday. Uh, Not seeing a whole lot that sticks out to me. Michigan does travel to TCU, but we kind of saw that TCU is not a very good team after the New Orleans loss. Georgia hosts Georgia Tech. No, I'm not going to count that in my picks because Georgia Tech is not looking to be a very good team this year at all. I think Georgia's going to wax them in that one. Okay, here we go. UCLA host Arizona. UCLA 3-0, Arizona 2-0. UCLA's looks sluggish in their first three games. Only beat Eastern Washington by 6, Pepperdine by 11, and they beat West Georgia by 21. But I think this game, it was only a 5-point game at halftime. 34.5 point spread. They're not even get close to covering that. And then Arizona, the huge win over Florida. And then or dominant win over Dixie State or Utah Tech, actually. The app I'm looking on still calls them Dixie State because that's what they were called before. They changed their name to Utah Tech. Anyways, this game at UCLA, I believe this still isn't being specific or just straight up telling me where this is. I might just have to stay on the ESPN app doing this because I'm on the real app right now, but it doesn't say where the game is. It's like the only drawback of that app. Okay, it's in Los Angeles, but I don't know if this is a neutral site. Either way, I'm taking Arizona. They have the freshman Koa Pete. He's looked incredible so far. UCLA just a little sketchy. They might be a little overrated. Just sluggish in the first three games. I think Arizona gets a win here and maybe even dominant. Maybe they win this one by 20 points, 15 points. Would not surprise me, but UCLA's look very suspect. But maybe they put it together in this one. But I like Arizona. So pushing forward to Saturday, Georgetown hosts Clemson. I guess I could talk about this one. Georgetown did go on the road and get a good win against Maryland, so yeah, I'll talk about this one. Georgetown's 2-0. Clemson's also 2-0. Clemson, good performances in some bye games. This one's at Georgetown. I like Georgetown actually to win this one. They've had an impressive start to the year, and I know Maryland's not supposed to be anything crazy this year after kind of exits they had for last year, but I think Georgetown gets this one. And maybe this is finally the year that they make the tournament or something. I know that's kind of overreaction from one game, but this would be a big one if they could get it on the way to that. Sorry, I got kind of distracted. I'm recording this in my truck, and somebody's car alarm started going off, kind of messed me up here, but let's keep going through these games. There's a lot of games that I almost want to pick, but not quite. Like Butler's traveling to SMU. Like, do I really need to pick this game? Like, I don't think so. I'll probably take SMU in that one, but they've looked sketchy to start off. This Saturday slate is definitely a little weaker than this past weekend. As I say that, I see BYU versus UConn. Well, yeah, I'll pick that one first. That's a huge game, top 7 matchup there. This one is in Boston, so it'll be a UConn crowd. BYU 2-0 to this point. Interesting win against Villanova, 77-66 start off because we don't really know how good Villanova is. And then they took care of Holy Cross this weekend. UConn 3-0. They had the rough game, or I mean, I guess you can call it rough game against New Haven. They only beat them by 24, and that's a new D1 team. And then they just absolutely went out and splattered UMass Lowell in response to that, and then took care of Columbia yesterday. So UConn up to number 3, BYU number 7. I like UConn. I do. I think this is going to be a really, really good team this year. And with St. John's falling to Alabama on Saturday, I honestly think UConn has a good chance to be the best team in the Big East. So I think they're going to pick up a win here against a BYU team that I still think is very good. Nebraska hosts Oklahoma. Nebraska 2-0 with wins over nobody's, and Oklahoma 1-1. They beat St. Francis, PA, and lost to Gonzaga. So this one at Nebraska, but I just don't really know how good Nebraska is. I don't. They're kind of a mixed team, kind of middle of the pack in the Big Ten this year projected, and Oklahoma's kind of the same, but I think Oklahoma's more talented. Even though this one's on the road, I like Oklahoma to go get a big one here, especially or much needed after losing that one to Gonzaga. So pushing forward on Saturday. There's really nothing else that sticks out. So we'll move on to Sunday. All right. Here's one that'd be big in football. Ohio State hosts Notre Dame. I'm not going to preview that one because neither of those teams are supposed to be great this season. But Houston versus Auburn on Sunday. I did not know about this game. I'm assuming this is neutral site. I actually went to this game last year. This was a game that happened in Houston last year, not at Fertitta Center or whatever, but it was at the Rockets Arena. But this one this year, yeah, this one's in Birmingham on Sunday. Wow. Ooh, I like Houston. I like Houston. They've had a sketchy start to the year, but this is something that they've done before, and it ended up meaning nothing. Auburn, huge question mark this year. They were pushed to the limit by Bethune and went into overtime with them. So I'm not sure how good they really are. I think Houston might expose them here and just wax them. Houston did move up to number one. Kind of confused as to why that happened. Purdue was number one before, but I guess the close game against Oakland kind of scared the voters a little bit. But I mean, Houston didn't look great either. But I like the Cougars to roll in this one. Let's see. Well, that's really it. Unless I want to talk about Memphis versus UNLV, which I don't know. UNLV took a really bad loss throughout their year. They lost to UT Martin at home, so I don't know about that. And then Florida is going to host Miami, so they're going to play Florida State and Miami in the same week. Miami has looked good, but I would take Florida in this one. But I'm not going to make that officially a pick on here. So that is my picks for this week. I may have some state content coming up. I thought about doing a recap of the week they just had. They took a tough loss last night to Iowa State, turned the ball over 26 times. Not ideal. Not sure exactly what this team is going to be looking like going forward. I wasn't able to watch a lot of the game, and we have YouTube TV, so I can't go back and watch ESPN replays, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to find some way to watch a lot of that game and kind of just see what was going on exactly to lead to that. But once I do that and I'm able to kind of diagnose what's going on, I may make a video talking about state and just my outlook on them going the rest of the way. Maybe their game this weekend and going forward. But that's all I got for this one, episode 3.